Session 2 of My God and King. God is King, but he chooses to rule through the people that he has created. Adam failed by disobedience, and so God called Abraham and made a covenant with him that he would become a great nation. But the purpose of that nation was to be a light to the rest of the world, spread God's glory and spread God's rule throughout the world. When the people of Israel had been called out of Egypt and they were wandering through the desert, God gave them a promise. He said when you enter the promised land, he would give them a king. So Deuteronomy 17:14-20, this is what it says. When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you and have taken possession of it, and you say, let us set a king over us, like all the nations around us, be sure to appoint over you a king that the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your own brothers. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who's not a brother Israelite. The king, moreover, must not acquire a great number of horses for himself, or make the people return to Egypt to get more for them. For the Lord has told you, you are not to go back that way again. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself a copy of this law, taken from the priests who are Levites. It's to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord, and follow carefully all the words of this law, all its decrees, and not consider himself better than his brothers, or turn from the Lord to the right or the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel. Making it very obvious that their king is to rule for God. Instructions to not have many horses or to get more from Egypt is instructions not to rely on military power or to rely on other countries. The instruction not to gain wealth is to avoid that strong temptation that wealth brings, that it brings like money equals power. He's also to be meticulous in obeying God's law, because he really is to be God's representative on earth. When we come to the book of Samuel, we read how indeed they were asking for a king. Now Samuel was a prophet at the time, and he was the leader of Israel, but he was getting old, and the people wanted a king to lead them in battle. So God said to Samuel to give them a king. He said to Samuel, this time next day you will meet a young man and you are to anoint him. Now, the young man was Saul. He happened to be seeking Samuel because he wanted to know where his father's lost donkeys were. So he's going to ask Samuel for help. And when Samuel saw him, God said, this is the one. Saul was not a willing king at first. In fact, Samuel gathered all the tribes of Israel to present their king to them. And he picked out the tribe of Benjamin. And then from the tribe of Benjamin, he chose the clan of Matri. And from the clan of Matri, he chose the son of Kish, and he was nowhere to be found. They eventually found him hiding in amongst all the baggage. Samuel then read out all the requirements as we had read described in Deuteronomy. He had them written on a scroll so that Saul would know exactly what was required of him as a king. But we know that Saul failed to rule according to God's commands. He let personal power and status get in the way of being obedient. Even God's chosen ones can be led astray.